Did you know that most snowmobile engine failures have nothing to do with bad luck and almost everything to do with habits? Most riders assume a sled is worn out and ready for the scrap heap around 3,000 or 4,000 miles. That's not even close to true, and a sled that shows 3,000 miles isn't automatically worn out. Not by a long shot, if it's been treated right. In today's video, I'll show you the 13 habits that separate the machines that die young from the ones that cross 20,000 miles with the original engine still pulling strong. Some of these you're probably skipping right now. One of them is the single most important thing you'll ever do for your sled, and almost nobody does it correctly. And stick around to the end, because the final habit costs you nothing, takes 2 minutes, and it's the one thing every high mileage owner swears by. These apply whether you ride a 2-stroke or a 4-stroke. And I'll call out the differences as we go. Let's get into it. Habit number 1, warm it up every single time. We're starting with the one that starts arguments because it's the fastest way to kill an engine that people still get wrong. Here's the physics, and once you understand it, you'll never skip it again. Under load, your piston heats up extremely fast, much faster than the cylinder and cooling system around it, which are still cold. That temporary mismatch in temperature and expansion can shrink the piston to cylinder clearance enough to cause scuffing, or in the worst case, seize the engine outright. That's a cold seizure. On a 2-stroke, it can happen in under a mile, and it's especially brutal on engines with forged pistons, which grow even faster. A rebuild is the reward, so let it warm up. On a 2-stroke, give it a few minutes and take it easy until it's up to temperature before you get into the throttle. 4-strokes are less prone to seizing, but they've got their own version of this problem. In deep cold, the oil is thick as molasses and needs time to thin out and actually reach everything before you load it up. Some 4-stroke manufacturers specify a warm-up procedure before you put the engine under heavy load, especially in extreme cold. So it's worth knowing what yours asks for. And here's the part people forget. This isn't just a first start of the day thing. Stop for lunch, let the sled sit for an hour in the cold, and you need to warm it again before you pin it. 2 minutes of patience against a $4,000 rebuild. That's the trade every single time, but warming it up means nothing if you're pouring the wrong stuff into it. Habit number 2, run the right oil, not the cheap oil. This one quietly decides how long your engine lives, and riders talk themselves out of it every day to save a few dollars a jug. On a 2-stroke, the oil isn't just lubrication, it burns with the fuel, and cheap oil doesn't burn clean. It leaves carbon behind. That carbon builds up on your power valves and in your exhaust, gumming up moving parts that are supposed to slide freely. Spend a little more on a quality synthetic that burns clean, and you dramatically slow down the crud that chokes a 2-stroke over time. The manufacturers test their engines extensively with specific oils, so their recommended oil is the safe bet, and a premium synthetic is cheap insurance. On a 4-stroke, it's about clean oil and changing it on schedule. And here's a detail the truck crowd gets wrong when they bring their habits to a sled. A snowmobile engine spins far faster and works far harder than a car engine. It's turning 7, 8, 9,000 RPM, cruising down the trail. Your oil is cycling and shearing many times faster than it ever would in your pickup. So it lasted 100,000 miles in my truck. Logic does not apply here. Change it more often, not less. One more thing that costs engines. Never mix oil types or brands blindly, especially when you switch. When in doubt, drain and run what the manual calls for. Habit number 3, grease every fitting before it costs you a bearing. Here's a 10-minute job that saves some of the most annoying and expensive failures on a sled, and most owners never touch a grease gun until something's already squealing. Your suspension, your steering, your pivot points. They're all riding on bearings and bushings out in the worst environment imaginable. Snow, water, salt spray, road grime, all of it working its way in. Those grease fittings, the little zerks tucked around the front and rear suspension and the steering, exist so you can push fresh grease in and force the moisture and grit back out. Skip it, and water sits in there. Rust starts, and a drive shaft bearing that cost you nothing to grease turns into a bearing that cracks, seizes, and takes the shaft with it. Don't overthink the amount either. Pump each fitting until you see fresh grease start to push out, and you know the old contaminated stuff is gone. Polaris spells this out directly. Fresh grease drives the moisture out of the joints and helps prevent the corrosion that kills these parts. Do it in the fall and again mid-season if you ride hard. It's the cheapest insurance on this whole list. Habit number 4, set your track tension right, not tight. This is the adjustment more riders get wrong than almost any other, and getting it wrong hurts you in both directions. Too loose and the track can ratchet or skip on the drivers, especially under hard acceleration or in deep snow. And a skipping track grinds and damages itself. Too tight, and now you're wasting horsepower fighting your own suspension, dragging on the slides, building heat, and putting needless load on the bearings. Both extremes cost you, which is exactly why this is a habit and not a one-time setup. Track tension changes as the track breaks in and its components wear, so it needs checking. Your manual gives you the spec, a specific amount of deflection when you push down on the track at a certain point with a certain weight. Check it on a stand, both sides, and make sure the track runs straight and centered while you're at it so it isn't wearing on one edge. 10 minutes with a wrench keeps your track, your slides, and your bearings all living longer. Ignore it, and you'll replace all 3 early. While we're on the running gear, there's a set of parts down there wearing out right now that most people ignore until it's too late. Habit number 5, watch your carbides, runners, and slides. These are the wear parts that quietly protect much more expensive parts. And because they wear slowly, it's easy to ride them straight past the point of no return. Start underneath the skis. Your carbides and wear rods are what bite into hardpack and ice and give you steering. Ride them down to nothing, and you don't just lose control on icy corners. You start wearing into the skis themselves, turning a cheap replacement into an expensive one. Then there are the slides, the high facts, the plastic strips the track runs on. They rely on snow for cooling and lubrication, and when they get too thin, they overheat, and now you're risking the track and the rails behind them. The habit is simple. Actually look at these before the season and periodically through it. There's usually a wear indicator or a minimum thickness in the manual for your slides. Replace them before they're gone, not after. Replacing a worn slide is cheap, and replacing a track or a set of skis because you ran the wear parts to zero is not. This is the kind of small, boring check that separates a sled that stays cheap to own from one that nickel and dimes you all winter. Quick question before we get into the drivetrain, because this next stretch is where the real money gets saved. 2-stroke or 4-stroke? Which do you trust to go the distance, and what's the highest mileage you've personally put on one sled? Drop it in the comments, I read them. Now let's keep going, because the next 4 habits are the ones that actually determine whether you see 20,000 miles. Habit number 6, change your coolant. It's not lifetime. If your sled is liquid cooled, there's antifreeze in it that a lot of owners assume lasts forever. It doesn't, and old coolant doesn't just stop protecting. It turns corrosive and starts eating the system from the inside. Coolant carries corrosion inhibitors that get used up over time in heat cycles. Once they're depleted, the coolant can go acidic and start working on your water pump, seals, and passages. And a snowmobile cycles its coolant far faster and harder than a car does, so you can't lean on automotive intervals. Depending on the brand and the coolant, you're generally looking at every 2 to 5 years. A Mosquito has called for every 2 years on some coolants and about 5 on their newer extended life orange formula. And Yamaha's manuals ask for yearly changes. Check what yours specifies. One important detail for the experts: don't grab random automotive coolant off the shelf. Use the exact coolant type and specification listed for your sled, because formulations and compatibility vary by engine and manufacturer. And the wrong stuff can cause problems in these small, high-output cooling systems. Right coolant, right interval, and you sidestep one of the ugliest and most expensive failures there is: a cooked engine from a corroded cooling system. Habit number 7, change the chain case oil and set the chain. Here's the transmission oil of the snowmobile world, and it's astonishing how many riders never change it once. Inside your chain case, a chain and sprockets carry power from the jack shaft to the drive shaft, running in a bath of oil that gets hammered by heat cycles and slowly contaminated. When you pull the drain plug, a little oil and a coating of fine metal shavings on the magnetic plug is completely normal. That's the system shedding the wear it's supposed to. What's not normal is leaving that broken down, metal-laden oil in there for years to grind away at the gears. Change it at least once a year. On most sleds built since the mid-90s, there's a drain plug that makes it easy. Some, like certain Ski-Doo models, need the cover pulled instead, and Arctic Cat's ACT drive system gets flushed and filled. And while you're in there, set the chain tension, because it's half the job. A loose chain can skip and grind on the sprockets and eventually destroy itself. And on sleds with mechanical reverse, a loose chain can even make it hard to engage forward or reverse cleanly. Fresh oil and correct tension once a year is one of the highest value hours you'll spend on the machine. Habit number 8, inspect your drive belt like it's about to fail. Because it will, your drive belt is a consumable that's always wearing, and it can strand you with no warning. But it also tells you things about the rest of your sled if you know how to read it. Pull the belt at least once a season and look hard. Cracks, frayed edges, missing chunks of the cogs, layers starting to separate, thin spots. Any of those means replace it now, not later. Even a belt that looks okay can be tired. A worn belt can quietly cost you peak RPM and crisp throttle response long before it looks ready to fail. If the sled felt soft last season, the belt is a prime suspect. Always carry a spare correctly numbered for your sled. Remote riding with no spare belt is how a great day becomes a very long walk. Here's the pro level part. When you put the belt back on and run the sled enough to engage the clutches, check where the belt sits in the secondary and check its deflection, the amount of slack when you push on it. If the belt is riding too low or the deflection is off, that's not just a belt issue. It's often telling you the belt is worn out or your clutches aren't aligned properly. The belt becomes a diagnostic tool. Most people just slap a new one on and miss the message entirely. Habit number 9, keep your clutches clean and never ever grease them. This is where I lose the people who think more lubrication is always better. On your clutches, it's the opposite, and getting this wrong will make your sled slip, bog, and wear out fast. Your primary and secondary clutches are a dry system. They work by gripping the belt through friction, and anything oily in there is poison. It makes the belt slip, which generates heat, which glazes everything and accelerates wear. So the habit is twofold. First, keep them clean. Over time, the sheave faces glaze over and a fine metal dust builds up, and that dust, left alone, migrates into the rollers and bushings and grinds them out. Clean the sheaves and clear that metal dust off following the procedure in your manual, since the exact method can vary between clutch designs. Second, Ian, write this one down. When you're spraying rust inhibitor or lube around the engine bay for storage, keep it completely off the belt and clutches. A single overspray of oil on those sheaves and your sled will slip the next time you ride it. Clean and dry is fast, it's free, and it's the difference between clutches that last and clutches that eat belts in themselves. If you're getting value out of this, do me a favor and subscribe. This channel is built for riders who actually want their machines to last, because these last 4 habits are the heavy hitters. Habit number 10, don't ignore your power valves. This is the one cars don't have. If you ride a modern 2-stroke, you've got exhaust power valves. Polaris calls them VES, Ski-Doo calls them RAVE, Arctic Cat calls them APV. And they are quietly strangling your engine right now if you've been ignoring them. 4-stroke riders, you get a pass on this one. This is a 2-stroke tax. Here's what they do and why they clog. These valves sit right in the exhaust port and move to change the port shape depending on RPM, which is how a modern 2-stroke gets both good low end and strong top end. But sitting in an exhaust stream over 1,000 degrees, bathed in the byproducts of burning fuel and oil, they collect hard carbon. Enough buildup and they stick, and a stuck power valve means a real noticeable loss of power. This is exactly why oil quality from Habit 2 matters so much. Cheap oil cakes them up fast, good synthetic keeps them cleaner longer. The habit is to follow the inspection procedure for your specific engine, because this genuinely varies. Some older power valve systems benefit from periodic cleaning, while certain modern electronic systems are designed differently and may not call for routine cleaning at all. So step 1 is knowing which camp your engine is in. Where cleaning is called for, it's about a 20-minute job. Pop the caps, pull the valves, and carefully clean the carbon off with the right solvent and a non-metallic pad, since the parts are soft aluminum and scratch easily. A pro tip: mark the position of any adjusters before you touch them, so everything goes back exactly as it was. And on some modern injected sleds, know that certain connectors shouldn't be disturbed, or the ECU may need a reset. And here's a myth worth killing because it costs people power. On the systems that do need attention, a sled that idles a lot, gets ridden gently, or runs cheap injection oil will cake them up faster than one ridden hard on good oil. The telltale signs are hard starts and sluggish, flat acceleration that creeps in gradually. So gradually that most riders adapt to it and never realize they've lost a chunk of their engine. If your engine is one that calls for inspection, do it on schedule. If they move freely and they're clean, put them back and you've lost 5 minutes. If they're gummed, you just saved your power band. Stay on top of it, and your two-stroke keeps making the power it made new. Ignore it on an engine that needs it, and you're slowly riding a detuned machine without even knowing it. Habit number 11. Store it right, or the summer kills it. Here's the brutal irony of snowmobiles. The damage that ends a lot of engines doesn't happen in the snow. It happens sitting in a garage all summer, doing nothing. Get storage wrong, and you can lose an engine to rust without ever riding it. 2 things matter most. First, fog the engine. Talk to anyone who rebuilds crankshafts and they'll tell you fogging oil is essential. It coats the cylinder walls, the rod bearings, the crank, all the bare metal that would otherwise sit exposed to moisture in the air for 6 months and quietly corrode. On a two-stroke, some sleds can fog themselves through an oil injection setting. On others, and on many four-strokes, you spray fogging oil into the intake or the cylinders and turn the engine to spread it. Check what your model actually calls for. And on a four-stroke, change the oil and filter before storage, not after. Used oil is full of acids and contaminants you do not want marinating your engine bearings all summer. Second, deal with the fuel. Ethanol-blended gas breaks down in months and turns to varnish that gums up carbs and injectors. Add stabilizer and run the engine long enough to pull treated fuel through the whole system, or for longer storage, drain it down according to your manual. Carbureted sleds usually get the float bowls drained. Then loosen the track tension so it doesn't take a set. Pull the belt off to save the clutches, get it up off the ground, and cover it somewhere dry. An hour in spring is the difference between a sled that fires right up in November and one that greets you with a corroded top end. Habit number 12. Break it in properly. You only get one chance. I saved the most important habit for nearly last because the experts will back me up on this. No single thing you do extends an engine's life more than a proper break-in. And you only get one shot at it, whether the sled is brand new or freshly rebuilt. Here's why it matters so much. During those first miles, the piston rings are seating themselves against the cylinder walls, and the way you run the engine determines how well they seal for the rest of its life. The goal is varied throttle and varied load. You want to run it through the whole RPM range with lots of on and off, and specifically avoid holding it wide open or at one steady speed for long stretches, because that's what glazes rings instead of seating them. Polaris considers the first tank of fuel the break-in period and warns against sustained full throttle for the first few hours, and notes that even on fuel-injected models with automatic break-in enrichment, you still have to ride it in properly. Here's the key nuance, though. Some engines specifically require or automatically provide extra oil during break-in, and some don't. So follow your manufacturer's break-in procedure exactly rather than adding oil on your own. The same goes for that first oil change on a four-stroke. Do it at the point your manual specifies, whether that's a mileage or an engine hours figure, because you'll be shocked what that first oil catches. And don't forget the belt gets a break-in too. New clutches come coated in preservative from the factory, and if the dealer didn't clean it off, your first belt can slip and glaze. Wipe the sheaves in the belt with solvent, and take it easy on full throttle pulls for the belt's first miles. Now, I'll be honest about something because this audience knows the debate exists. There are plenty of opinions about how aggressively to break an engine in. Some baby it for hundreds of miles, others swear by short, harder bursts to seat the rings. But for the longest engine life, the safest rule is simple and hard to argue with. Follow the manufacturer's procedure, warm the engine fully, vary the throttle and load, and avoid sustained wide-open operation during the specified break-in period. That's the part every camp actually agrees on, and it's the part that protects your engine. Do the break-in right, and you've set the ceiling for how long that engine can live. Rush it, and you've capped it before your first real ride. Habit number 13. Keep a logbook. This is the one that ties it all together. Here's the bonus habit, the one every high-mileage owner swears by, and it costs you nothing but a notebook. Write it all down, every oil change, every chain case service, every belt, every set of slides, the date, and the mileage each time. Here's why it's so powerful. A logbook turns problems into patterns you can actually see. If you notice you're losing a little coolant every few hundred miles, that's an early warning you'd never catch from memory. If your slides are wearing out faster than they should, The log tells you to go looking for an alignment or tension problem before it costs you a track. You stop guessing about when you last did something and start managing the machine with real information. And there's a bonus to the bonus. When you sell, a complete service log is worth real money. It's proof to a smart buyer that the sled was cared for, and on a machine where a clean history separates a 20,000-mile survivor from a tired gamble, that history is the difference between top dollar and a low ball. A $2 notebook or a notes app on your phone protects the sled while you own it and pays you back when you sell it. Every rider who keeps one wonders how they ever rode without it. There they are. 13 habits that decide whether your sled dies young or crosses 20,000 miles with the engine it was born with. None of them are hard, none of them are expensive. They're just the difference between an owner who reacts to failures and one who prevents them. So tell me, which of these have you been skipping? And which one do you swear by that I didn't mention? Drop it in the comments and settle it, because this channel is full of riders who know. Subscribe for more, and I'll see you on the next one.